And gentlemen, thank you for coming this evening. We are honored to have with us three of the state Senate candidates for District 02. They're going to be taken in, I guess you've already been selected, right, the order you're going in. But that order was selected at random. We're going to open the program with Mr. Tom Lynch. Come on up, Tom, please. Each candidate will have 20 minutes. Of that time, they can make their own allocation for how much they want to give to their presentation versus how much they want to give to questions and answers, although we do ask that you give at least 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name's Tom Lynch. I'm running for 2nd District Senate seat, and I'd like to thank Joanne Gifford and the Napa Valley Democrats, along with the Napa Valley College Students for Democratic Society, for hosting this event. I'd like to thank the Press Democrat for covering this with video. I asked Christine earlier if she could make my neck smaller, and she said no, so it's okay, yeah. But I am a 30-year resident of Guerneville along the Russian River. I'm a general contractor. I have the good fortune at the age of 43 to have met my wonderful wife 9 years ago. Actually, it was 10 years ago. We got married 9 years ago. She's watching too, by the way. But anyway, we have the good fortune also we have a 6-year-old daughter named Katya, and my mother-in-law Lima lives with us also. And I've been very active in Sonoma County politics and in North Bay politics for many, many years. I've been an environmental activist where I was part of a battle with Santa Rosa for 25 years, trying to get Santa Rosa's wastewater out of the Russian River. And we all working together succeeded in that. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Evans, for your part in that as a councilwoman. And I've also been active with economic development. I've served on the Sonoma County Economic Development Board. I've been on a redevelopment oversight committee for the Russian River for the last 8 years. And I was appointed a year ago by new Supervisor Efren Carrillo to serve on the Sonoma County Planning Commission. And I am a student of what's going on in society, as all of us are. In college, I majored in political science, and I was at Iowa State University, I was a member of the Revolutionary Student Brigade. This was in the late 70s. And I used to rent from a gentleman named Joe Murphy, who was one of the founders and members of IWW, International Workers of the World. They called him One Punch Murphy. But to me, in my studies of what's going on in our society, I think we're in the midst of the largest transference of wealth from younger generations to older generations in the history of mankind. And what is happening is we are seeing more and more of these unfunded obligations that are being given to the first wave of retiring baby boomers, if you will, and those that have retired before. And we're further burdening the next generations with these unfunded obligations that we've given ourselves. And part of what's happening in California, it began, if you know, the great line in the beginning of Terminator series is incept date, when the beginning of the end began. And many will agree that in September of 1999, when Senate Bill 400 passed, this is kind of arcane, but what it is CalPERS, the California Public Employee Retirement System. In 1999, they went to the legislature and they said that the stock market is doing great. The stock market went from 2,700 in 1990 to 11,800 in the year 2000. And they said to the legislature that you can give these massive, unfunded, retroactive pension increases, and we're going to be able to cover it. And they predicted that the stock market in the year 2010 would be at 45,000. And today, if you looked at the stock market, further crashed. I mean, today we are less than we were 10 years ago, and yet the government, with the beginning with the state, they funded these large increases in pensions, and then the cities and the counties followed suit. And what has happened is we're seeing more and more of the resource that's to go toward education, toward healthcare, toward social services, toward taking care of the least of the in our society is going to fund these unfunded obligations. And so what I believe we need to do is start addressing some of these unfunded obligations. And the gentleman that was in here earlier, you know, talking about public employee unions and unions per se, I actually, 3 years ago when I ran for Sonoma County Supervisor, I met with SEIU, Service Employee International Union, an auditorium with hundreds of SEIU county workers, and they asked me then, what is the solution to all of these economic problems that we're having with government services? And I said to them, we are in a major recession where we're looking at declining income and increasing costs, and what we need to do in order to avoid layoffs is we need to freeze wages and benefits. That did not happen. What happened is over the last 3 years in Sonoma County, and at the state for that matter, some of the wages have continued to rise. And now I'm saying, I recently met with 30 heads of SEIU, Service Employee International Union in Santa Rosa, and I sat down with them, and in a very engaging meeting, I said to them that in order to protect their jobs and to protect their benefits, what we need to do is we need pay cuts and pension reform. Otherwise, we're going to see a continuing loss of all of these essential services. And they were receptive. And the other thing, a lot of the increased cost with salaries over the last 10 years, a lot of that has been toward what I call the upper tier. And that is like in Sonoma County, of the 4,000 county workers, there are 500 now that their combined salary and benefit average is over $200,000 apiece. And where I live, as with most of you, and see the economic consequences of what's happening in our communities, we're seeing schools close, bus services canceled. The town of Guerneville, where I live, the fire department is at risk of losing their ambulance service. And it's just, we have to recognize the importance of economics in order to affect progressive social change. So part of what I'm proposing is pay cuts and pension reform, and also along with that, with the criminal justice system, excuse me. I sometimes dry out when I'm nervous. But anyway, thank you. The criminal justice system, with 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of all the prisoners in all the prisons in all the world are in the United States. What we have done is we've criminalized ignorance and poverty and mental illness. Oh, thank you. And we need to change this. We need to start putting more back into education. That is the ounce of prevention over the pound of cure. And there are a lot of things that we can do with that. There are a lot of, like the marijuana legislation, it's ridiculous that we have all of these people in prison over a victimless crime, but in turn also by having prohibition, we end up, our society has become Chicago in the 20s, where you end up with people growing marijuana in their houses, people breaking into them, gunfire, people killing each other, and then going to prison for a long, long time. So I support the measure to reform the marijuana laws and take care of that. And another thing is that I said to the Sonoma County Employee Retirement Association, we need to reinvent ourselves. I said that over the last 3 years as a contractor, my income is down 50%, and I've had to reinvent myself. And what we've had to do is we've had to learn to live within our means, my family, and we've increased our healthcare deductible, we've taken out the fax line, we've done everything line item by line item going over that. And I don't think the cities, the counties, or the states are there yet. And what is required is we have to recognize reality. You know, it's like we cannot legislate the physical laws of the universe. We cannot legislate and say that you can make water freeze at 33 degrees any more than you can give these massive unfunded obligations that are robbing us of all of our funds. And with that, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Okay, take care.
Oh, don't walk away.
Oh, questions?
Okay. Yeah, you
Oh, I thought it was afterwards. Oh, good, questions. Okay.
Would you be kind enough to repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Because
Okay.
there's no mic up here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I too am a contractor, and when you're self-employed, you don't have the benefit of falling back on some deal that was made a few years ago guaranteeing you
Yeah.
money. There are no guarantees.
Yeah.
And when I take a vacation, I have no income during that period of time because I'm self-employed, so I can relate to what you're saying. But if you go to public employees and ask them to take a pay cut in order to address the budget crisis, how much of a pay cut are we talking? Do you believe?
You know, what I said to SEIU, oh, I'm sorry. The question is, how much are we asking public employees to take as a cut? And what I said to SEIU, I'm a student of this, and I've been following it for many years. There's a wonderful website called pensiontsunami.com. I even link it on my ballot statement, but it's not something that's just happening here. Of course, it's happening throughout the state, throughout the country, throughout the world. But what I suggested to SEIU as an example, in Ireland right now, they have massive decline in income similar to California. And what they're doing, and it's under the guise of this incredible finance minister named Brian Linehan, and what they're doing in Ireland is a graduated salary-based pay cut of 5 to 15%, depending on how much you make. And I think that's fair. You know, the more that you make, the more the cut should be. But this is why in my ballot statement, I'm saying that we need pay cuts, not furloughs. I don't want to see cuts in services. And what I hate seeing are there are thousands of young teachers being laid off throughout California, schools closing, all these services being cut. And what we're doing is we are eating our seed corn. We are cannibalizing our workforce, and we expect this next generation that we have so burdened with our own unfunded obligations to be able to pay for that while we're laying them off. And I am an advocate. I'm a social advocate for progressive change, and I think there are ways to do that fairly. I'm sorry, any more questions? Yes?
How do you feel about this whole issue of open carry for guns and maybe going to grocery store and seeing people walking around with guns in holsters?
I think it's ridiculous. I think that we have enough of people acting out and killing each other all over our society, and I am totally opposed to any kind of legislation that would allow people to walk around carrying guns. And I think most, just about all law enforcement would agree with that too. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to know what your opinion is regarding laws such as Arizona's immigration law, and if such acts begin to service in California, what would you support it or oppose it, and what measures would you take?
I oppose it. I think it's an incredible burden to law enforcement to go around and start enforcing, you know, and asking people what their nationality is and things like that. I think with, you know, it's every country in the world has honorable guest worker programs. Why can't we? And we've got to be able to figure it out. And what they're doing in Arizona, they have problems in Arizona, but they shouldn't be taking it out on people like that and going around and affecting people's civil rights and stuff like that. And I don't think that will happen in California. I think that we're more progressive perhaps in Arizona, but I just don't think that'll happen here. I hope it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just wanted to ask a couple questions. What you're talking about, we're going to go after the public employees. It's become kind of a familiar refrain here, particularly in the downturn in the economy. And one of the things that I always wonder about, you know, I mean, for instance, today there's a story in CNN Money saying that actually studies are showing that public employees are falling behind their private sector counterparts in terms of wages and benefits. There was another story a few days ago that California is the third lowest state in terms of state employees to population ratio.
I saw that one,
Lowest
yeah.
ratio of state employees. And a lot of times in these arguments too, it kind of feels like, what I don't hear is a lot of these public employees also, they contribute to these pensions. It's not just this large
Absolutely.
that's given away.
Absolutely.
They also forego Social Security and things like that.
Some of them,
But
yeah.
what I'm most concerned of, so when I hear that argument, is what I don't hear is, would you also be willing to support the bill that was recently introduced by Tom Amiano that's saying we need to go after this loophole in Prop 13 that basically says businesses can sell other business, a couple years ago, Shell Oil bought Jiffy Lube, I think it was, and none of that got reassessed.
Mhm.
And $7 or $8 billion a year is just not going into California.
Mhm.
And it's just being lost. And we're also the only state that doesn't charge a severance fee for taking oil out of the ground, where Louisiana and Texas and
Mhm.
some of these other conservative strongholds do, and we know. And it just feels to me like we talk about these unfunded pensions, we talk about public employees, but the white elephant in the living room is this hemorrhaging of money because, quite frankly, California is pretty generous, I think, to businesses that want to take money out of California and put it back in. Would you be willing to support measures like Tom Amiano going after Prop 13 and closing some, not
Mhm.
affecting for residential owners, but for corporate owners, looking at things like an oil severance fee, those kind of things to increase California's revenues?
The question is, would I support recent legislation introduced by Tom Amiano that would revise Prop 13 and charge corporations, when they sell the business, so to speak, to raise, like a house, when someone sells a house, the value goes up. And I support certain instances of tax increases right now, but I said in my ballot statement that I don't support any tax increases until there has been reforms in government. And what I said to SAIU in the meeting, and by the way, I do have a lot of supporters from Sonoma County, and what I'm trying to do is support public jobs. How do you support public jobs when you're laying off all of the younger workers? And it's like I argued with my dad once in Iowa that I said, why is suicide illegal? And he said, because we have to help protect people from themselves. And if we have to help protect the less senior, younger workers and protect our essential services from being cannibalized by older workers that are unwilling to take pay cuts or have reform, then I want to see reforms first. What's happened in California since the year 2000, the average household income has been on the decline in the private sector, and in the public sector, we have seen massive increases in salaries and benefits, much of it to the upper tier. That's not secretaries or clerks. They've been able to keep up with inflation. But the pensions also, it's going to collapse. The pensions are continuing to rise more and more and more to the point that, and it's not just the taxpayers, it's the public employees themselves that pay into that as well. And so in order to protect the pensions of everybody, not just the first wave of retiring baby boomers going through the system, they call us the pig and the python, right? Where the baby boomers, we were the biggest generation to go through, and with the hospitals and with schools and now with housing and everything. But I believe that we need to start realistic reforms, yeah.
We have
Thank
time
you.
for one more question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll just ask my first question and my second question follow up after that. First off, are you familiar with the Hazelwood Act in Texas?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and read this off. The Hazelwood Act provides qualified veteran spouses and children with an education benefit of up to 150 hours of tuition and fee exemptions at state-supported colleges or universities. And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm a student veteran here at Napa Valley College. Not only am I participating in Students for a Democratic Society, but I think I participate with the Veterans Club here on campus. And I'm sure there's, it's safe to say that they're with me in supporting something similar to go on in California with something similar to the Hazelwood Act. And if you were elected, how would you support something similar to the Hazelwood Act in California?
I like the movement nationwide when you see soldiers that you do the sign language that says thank you, and thank you for your services. And absolutely, I would like to see California do more for veterans, but also for everyone with education. It's appalling how much money we're putting into education in California. And again, part of that is we have to reform some of the spending and some of the programs that we have in California. But I support it, and thank you for your service to your country. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Tom Lynch. Next up, we have our Assembly member, Noreen Evans. David is your timekeeper. When do you want him to give you the high sign?
When do I want it?
Yeah, at 10 or 15? Or?
1 second, I'm just set
10's good.
10's good? Okay,
Sure.
would you give her one of those?
Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you again. I am running for State Senate, and as you know, I have served you for the last 6 years in the State Assembly, representing Napa, Solano, and Sonoma counties. I want to give you a little bit of my background before I came to the State Assembly, however. I'll just start with that. I've lived in Northern California my entire life. I've lived in Santa Rosa for the last 30 years. I raised my family in Santa Rosa. I have 3 children. I am a lawyer. I received my bachelor degree at CSU Sacramento, and then I received my law degree from McGeorge School of Law, graduating in 1981. And after that, I came to the city of Santa Rosa and practiced law there for over 20 years. I started out my political career back in 1993, and this was not something that I had ever intended to do. But I lived in a beautiful community in Santa Rosa, and the city of Santa Rosa was building a freeway right through my neighborhood. It's now called Fountain Grove Parkway. Some of you may know about that. So I decided I could either sit around and complain, or I could go down to City Hall and I could get involved. So I went down to City Hall and I got involved. I got appointed to the Planning Commission, where I served for 3 years, and then in 1996 I first ran for Santa Rosa City Council on a platform of adopting the first voter-approved urban growth boundary in the state of California, and that was adopted in 1996. I served for 8 years on the Santa Rosa City Council, and I was known primarily as an environmental council member. And my focus was really city-centered growth, protection of agriculture, protection of our open spaces, restoration of our waterways, and you can go downtown in the city of Santa Rosa right now. You can see one of the projects that I worked on, which was the restoration of Santa Rosa Creek, which now has a beautiful linear parkway along that creek. I was fortunate enough to work on the Santa Rosa City Council with our beloved Senator Patricia Wiggins. And when she was termed out from the State Assembly back in 2004, I then ran. I ran in 2004, was successfully elected, and I've served since then. So I'm here to ask you tonight for your support for my campaign for State Senate, now that Patricia Wiggins is unable to run for a second term. And I'm here to ask you for your support, not just based on promises of what I will do in the next 4 years if I am elected, but also to tell you what I have done, so that you will know that I will take the same kind of leadership that I've provided for you in the last 6 years in the State Assembly on your behalf to the State Senate. Before I do that, let me just briefly describe the State Senate district. It's 6 counties: Napa, Solano, and Sonoma, which are the ones I represent now. And in addition to that, Lake County, Mendocino County, and Humboldt County. This Senate district includes 1/3 of the California coastline. Coastal issues are extremely important in this district. And I have been serving for the last couple of years on the California Coastal Conservancy. And I will bring that experience and that dedication and that advocacy to the State Senate as well. But first of all, you're going to have to look at 3 candidates here, and there's actually a 4th one in the race who is unfortunately unable to be with us tonight. And you're going to have to judge us on a couple of things. The first one I would suggest is you judge us by our friends. The people that are supporting me in this race are many, many, and they include many, many people throughout the entire district. I am supported by Congressman Mike Thompson, Congressman George Miller, Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey. I am supported by my friends Napa Supervisors Diane Dillon, Keith Caldwell, Brad Wagenknecht, and I am supported as well by teachers, nurses, firefighters, engineers, electricians, carpenters, law enforcement, the Sierra Club, California League of Conservation Voters, and Equality California, and many, many more. You can go on my website for a more complete list if you'd like. I am also supported by more than, Councilwoman Inman from Napa County, from the city of Napa, thanks for reminding me of that. And thanks for your support. And I'm supported by almost 100 elected officials throughout 6 counties, and they support me because they know that every day when I go to that dysfunctional capital in Sacramento, I am fighting for them and their constituents on a daily basis. The second thing I think you should look at when you look at the candidates is analyze their records. And again, as I told you, I'm not here just to make you promises. I'm here to tell you what I've done so that you know what I will do. The number one thing that we need in the state of California is jobs. We are in the worst economic depression ever. In fact, many economists are saying now this is bigger and worse than the Great Depression. Jobs is our number one priority. We can all promise you that we will go to Sacramento and we will create jobs. But I'm going to tell you what I've done over the last 6 years that have either created jobs or saved jobs during this economic depression. Working with Mike Thompson, I have obtained millions of dollars for the Napa River Flood Control Project. And you can go in downtown Napa right now, and you can see how beautiful that is. That meant hundreds of jobs for Napa County. Again, working with Congressman Thompson, I obtained millions of dollars for the St. Helena Flood Control Project. Not only did we create jobs in that project, but we saved homes. Recently, I was able to get several $millions for both St. Helena Hospital and Queen of the Valley Hospital right here in Napa in Medi-Cal reimbursements. Millions of dollars, and they honored me last week in a really nice little ceremony at a luncheon. And they told me that that saved dozens of jobs in their hospital. It's over $3 million every single year for Queen of the Valley Hospital. I've also been able to obtain bond funding for the improvements along Jameson Canyon Road, and bond funding for the Highway 80 carpool lane, which is now up and running. Again, hundreds of construction and infrastructure jobs during this economic crisis. Recently, working with Fish and Game, I was able to get the department to speed up its permit process in order to approve the dry docks on Mare Island so that we can start dismantling the mothball fleet that's been sitting in Suisun Bay for the last 40 to 50 years, ever since World War II. And it's an environmental hazard that is occurring there on a daily basis. We're going to move those ships over to Mare Island, and we're going to start dismantling them. And that will create hundreds of jobs for Vallejo. In addition to which, I was just able to get the governor's signature last year on legislation that allows the Vallejo Unified School District, which you may know has been taken over by the state a few years ago, to sell surplus property in order to keep their doors open and keep their teachers employed. So those are some of the things that I've been able to do with respect to creating jobs. That's the kind of leadership I've provided over the last 6 years. That's the kind of leadership I will provide in the Senate. I wanted to mention also the budget. Everybody knows what a terrible, terrible time we've had with the state budget. In the last year and a half, I'm now majority whip in the state assembly, but in the last year and a half, I served as the budget chair. And I served not only as the budget chair in the state assembly, but I chaired the Joint Legislative Committee on Budget. Now, I took over the budget committee the week after Lehman Brothers fell in late 2008. If you remember those days, it was just beginning to dawn on us that something terrible was about to happen. And it was a catastrophe. The first quarter of the calendar year 2009, the state lost over 25% of its anticipated revenues. By this time last year, we were looking at closing a $40 billion deficit in a $100 billion budget. Try to make that add up. You could close every single prison, you could close every single university in the state, you would not be able to balance the budget. You could fire every state employee, not just furlough them or reduce their pay, and they have received a 15% pay cut. You could fire them, and you couldn't close this budget gap. So we had a lot of work to do. Now, catastrophes happen. This happens. The question is, how do we respond? And that's what I want you to judge me on, and other candidates as well. What would they have done? If they had a better idea, Let's hear about it. And why didn't they bring it to me a year ago when I was frantically trying to find ways to close this $40 billion deficit? But so the question is, how do you respond? The governor's response was, let's shut down state government. Let's close down in-home supportive services, which allows our, thank you, I'll take a couple more minutes, which allows our seniors and our disabled to stay in their homes. Let's shut down Medi-Cal, which allows the state to provide medical care for the poor and the indigent. Let's close down CalWorks, which is how our mostly single mothers of color get from welfare to work. Let's close down state parks. Let's close down Cal Grants. Let's close everything down. That was his proposal. So I had a couple of choices. I could say, after you, Governor, let's go. Or I could say, well, I'll trade you children if you give me the elderly. Or I'll trade you state parks if you'll give me the disabled. But I wasn't willing to do that. First thing I did was I, for the first time ever in state history, opened up our budget process to the public. We held over 2 weeks of public hearings. Thousands of people came from all over the state by bus and testified what the governor's proposal would do to them in their daily lives, day after day after day after day. So that brought us to me saying, no, we're not going to do this, Governor. I drew the line in the sand. And we were able, instead of taking his proposal and shutting everything down, we compromised. We made the proverbial tough decisions that people say you have to be willing to make. We made them. Everybody in this state has felt the pain, undeniable. Everybody has been cut. Everybody feels it. But I am committed, as we go forward from this day on, to making sure that everybody has a share in the recovery. So judge me by what I've done. Judge me by the fact that I opened this up to everybody in the state of California. And I'm going to make sure, if I'm lucky enough to represent you in the state Senate, that I take that kind of leadership to the state Senate as well. The last thing I'll mention is offshore oil drilling. The governor brought that proposal to my committee. I killed it twice. He then brought it to the legislature. It passed the Senate, came to the assembly floor. I joined with Pedro Nava from Santa Barbara. If you remember the 1969 oil spill, we killed it again. Just this week, after the Gulf of Mexico disaster, the governor has said we were right. He has now joined us and said no oil drilling off the coast of the state of California. That's the kind of leadership I've given you over the last 6 years. That's what I'll do in the state Senate. I ask for your support, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you. Questions? Yes, sir.
So I was having a conversation with someone on the far right, and they said something I've heard echoed several other times. A lot of people on the far right feel like the Constitution's been violated, and they feel like the social contract's been broken, and so they're at a point where if someone from the government tries to tell them what to do, they're not going to hesitate shooting. Like, that's echoes a concern someone else put up. And I mean, I think it's more than just sort of, I mean, it is a fringe trend, but I think it's something to be alarmed of. I mean, if you look across the nation, it seems like the militia movement's growing again, like it has in the early 90s. And even in Napa, there was an article about a year ago about an ammo shortage because so many people were buying the ammo. And I mean, how does one deal with that perspective? I know for me personally, there was a Tea Party protest and SDS mobilized 7 people to counter-protest them. And you saw they were arming themselves there too. So how does one deal with that perspective? I mean, when we're talking about politics and whatnot. Basically,
to summarize, how does one deal with the Tea Party perspective? And my assessment, having watched this for over a year now, is that many of the people in the Tea Party movement, not all, but many, feel very disenfranchised and very frightened and very angry. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. This economic downturn is certainly one of them. What Mr. Lynch mentioned about the top 1% in our economy having 90% or more of our assets and our wealth, that's another reason. And I think that kind of a shift always comes with social unrest. Many of us lived through the 60s and the early 70s, and we remember that kind of angst and that kind of difficulty in adjusting to huge changes that are happening in our society. And I think that's what we're seeing there as well. In my opinion, being able to educate folks on what is going on in our society, why they may feel anger and concern and worry, and being able to channel that in more constructive ways for political change, that's how I deal with it. Is that it?
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm in favor of only changing the 2/3 requirement on the budget.
Mhm.
We also do it on the revenue side, because I think if we get it past that one hurdle, we'll never get it past the next. And it's fundamentally anti-democratic to require 2/3 of the legislature to pass things having to do with appropriations and revenue. And I'd like to know what your position is on that.
Question is whether the question is my position on changing the 2/3 vote on revenue and the 2/3 vote on passing a budget. I support both. The reality is, though, that a lot of polling's been done throughout the state, and most voters would support returning a majority vote to adopting a budget only and would not support a majority vote on increasing taxes. That's the reality, but I would support both. And I mean, I've served now in the state assembly for 6 years, and I've run into this problem repeatedly. The state legislature can't do much of anything except change existing law on a majority vote. Almost everything else we do requires a 2/3 vote. And that, along with other things such as term limits, has really created a dysfunctional system in our legislature. And there is an initiative circulating right now, and I think it might have just been turned into the Secretary of State's office to check the signatures. Hopefully it'll be on the ballot in November.
The on-time budget act is what you're...
Is that it? Great. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're down to the third and final candidate. That would be Joanne Sanders. Do you spell that with an E on the end?
Yes.
You do? Okay, you spelled it the right way then.
Oh, 10 minutes is fine. Just want to make sure I leave plenty of opportunity for questions. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening. My name's Joanne Sanders, and I'm running for California State Senate District 2. It's the Senate seat that Senator Wiggins is retiring from, and her retirement presents a tremendous opportunity for those of us who want to see Sacramento turned around. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to say what I plan to do when I'm elected to the state Senate. I tip my hat to the Democrats of Napa Valley and to the students here at Napa Valley College for taking the initiative to put this event together. I know it takes time out of your day, but it's very important to give democracy a voice, and you certainly set the example for the other Democratic clubs throughout District 2 and throughout California. So thank you very, very much. I hope to see more of this by the time June 8th rolls around. I am here to talk to you about why I am the best choice for not only your endorsement to represent the Senate District 2 in Sacramento. I want to work to change the way we have destroyed our state's budget through total fiscal mismanagement. I want to work in Sacramento to bring more transparency and accountability to the legislative process. And I want to end the partisan gridlock that has completely frozen our state from moving forward. Now, getting the job market back is the first step to getting our state back on track and solving our long-term budget problems. And let me tell you why. The state of California has a revenue problem. We can talk all day long about cutting this and cutting that, but we're cut to death. What we need to do is bring revenue back to the state of California, and how are we going to do that if we can't increase taxes? Well, there's a much simpler way to do it, ladies and gentlemen, and that way is to solve another problem that has become acute in our great state, and that is the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate has skyrocketed in the last 5 years. It is totally unacceptable. In the last 10 years that I've been doing business in Napa County, the unemployment rate has gone from 2.9% to 13%. And in some parts of this district, it's even higher. So this lack of jobs has impacted the state's budget because the state of California's #1 revenue source is income tax. So if we're not working, the state's not making money. And if the state's not making money, the state's going to have to cut services. Those services are felt acutely right here in Napa College, and they're also felt in city coffers. and they're felt in the way of tuition increases. At Sonoma City Hall, where I'm a former mayor and current city councilwoman, they're felt by the state reaching in the back, right into the checking account of every city across this state and raiding our money and taking our money to balance its budget and hand out hefty pay raises to legislative staff. We've got to put an end to it, and we will if you elect me. Until our state government changes the way it does business, and it helps businesses thrive here who are already here, and it helps attract new companies who want to create jobs here, and until it helps entrepreneurs who want to found new companies here in the state of California and create more jobs for all of us, we're not going to solve our state's long-term budget problems. I am a small business owner. I am in the business of facilitating job creation. Over the last 10 years, together with my husband and my clients, we have created 3,800 jobs right here in Napa County, Sonoma County, and Solano counties. I know how to facilitate job creation, and I will work to make sure that happens for all of us in this district, and we can get ourselves out of this deficit situation. I know by working as a job creator over the last 10 years in this district, I know what it takes to help businesses thrive and survive. I will work to streamline the bureaucratic regulations that have been put up year after year that hinder businesses from creating jobs rather than welcome them to create jobs. I will streamline our tax system so that we don't compete with other states. When other states can lure companies away from California, we've got a problem, and they're doing it because they've got a better package for companies, and companies are going to go and take their jobs where they can afford it, and that's what's been happening in the state of California, and that's why the recession is worse here than it is in many other parts of this country, and that's why we're not getting ourselves out of this recession, is because we have gone year after year encouraging businesses to leave rather than rolling out the welcome mat. And the other states are rolling out the welcome mat, and we're losing, and we don't have jobs. We don't have jobs for you when you get out of college this summer. You need a job. You need a job to pay for those rising tuition costs. Well, guess what? I'm sorry to tell you, there aren't a whole lot of jobs, but there will be if we turn around the way we do business in Sacramento. Our problems in this state are not Democratic or Republican problems like you read about in the newspaper. They are economic problems. And until we reset the business climate in the state of California, we will not accomplish the goal of restoring the lost luster that put this state on the map in this country of being the economic engine with a first-rate workforce, highly educated, highly knowledgeable, highly experienced. Those are the kinds of things that we have lost. And until we reset the business climate, they're not going to come back. And we'll have to continue to cut the budget. That's not what I want to do. When I'm your next state senator, I won't raise your tuition. I will provide you with jobs because I will work with the businesses that are here and help to attract the ones that we've lost to come back and bring those good paying jobs to all of us. I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the legislature when it comes to transparency. Transparency has been mentioned this evening, and I think it's first front and center with being able to know with what your elected officials do with their votes when they're elected to represent you. In the state of California, somehow we've come up with this procedure for expunging votes or erasing votes from the legislative record. It's not acceptable. It has no business in our responsible democracy here, and I will work as your next state senator to make sure that kind of behavior goes away. We need to know how the people we elect are voting when they're in office. In fact, I mentioned earlier that I was a mayor of Sonoma. It's a beautiful city, by the way. If any of you head east, we have beautiful wineries there and a lovely town. that is very well managed financially, I might add. We in the city of Sonoma have a very strong financial situation to weather the storm through these poor economic times. Again, in spite of the fact that the state has come along and put their hands in our checking account and used us as their savings account. In the city of Sonoma, we struggle every day to provide services, to make sure that our police department is funded, to make sure our firefighters are fully funded to be able to protect and provide basic services that our residents expect. We keep our library open, we fund economic development, we make great strides in solar and energy efficiency programs. In fact, the city of Sonoma has been recognized as being having the most solar panels installed per capita in the state of California for similarly sized cities. We've also been recognized for being a very bike-friendly city, and those kinds of things, those kinds of rewards are because we have worked together as a city council to move our city forward. We've done it, we've continued to provide services, and we've done it without raising taxes. In fact, in my 6 years on the Sonoma City Council, with declining property tax revenues, declining sales tax revenues, declining hotel tax revenues, the state coming in and yanking $2.5 million out of our economic stimulus funds, we have balanced our budget and we've continued to provide those services because we work together, we work in a transparent fashion, we collaborate, and we move our city forward. We don't get to point fingers and say it's the other party or it's his fault for why I'm not getting my job done. I'm answerable to my constituents, as are my fellow council members, and you can all see the results. In the city of Sonoma, we were the first city to sign on to the Sonoma County Energy Efficiency Program. This is a program that I'm very proud to have been part of. And it's a program that enables property owners to finance energy improvements to their properties without taking out a loan. They can do it on through their property taxes. In Sonoma County, it was just reported last week in the Press Democrat that over 700 buildings have been retrofitted as a result of this program. And we have many, many more accomplishments ahead of us. Those are the kinds of programs that require having funding. And if the state continues to come in and balance its back on local communities and cities, those kind of programs are going to go bye-bye. I don't want to see that happen, and I will work as your next state senator to make sure that we can have and retain the progress that has been made and that we've become noted for in District 2 for environmental stewardship while still creating jobs, because those two things do not have to go at odds with one another. Businesses want to be responsible, residents and community members want to be responsible, everybody wants to do the right thing, and given the opportunity to work together in a climate for collaboration rather than finger pointing, we will take this state back to where it was 30, 40 years ago. My experience as a city councilwoman, former mayor, job creator, small business owner, have prepared me well for being your next state senator. There's one other thing that has prepared me for that job as well, and that is the fact that I changed my party 3 years ago to the Democratic Party. I changed my party because I decided that the Republican Party no longer represented me. As a pro-choice, pro-gay rights woman, the party left me. And I joined the Democratic Party, and I'm very proud to be a Democrat because I know that it is in this party that I can take my ideas and make them a reality and become your next state senator. The stakes are high in this race. I appreciate the fact that this forum has been televised. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the residents in this district to know that there is a real race. And I too have endorsements. I am proud of my endorsement from a number of elected officials throughout the district. I am also proud to have Senator Ron Calderon's endorsement in the state Senate. And I'm proud of the Sonoma Valley firefighters for endorsing me, as well as hundreds of other residents throughout the district. And I look forward to your questions, and I'm very happy to answer them. Thank you. Yes.
So you mentioned that business and environmental stewardship doesn't have to be, it can go hand in hand, that doesn't have to contradict. I was wondering how you would respond to those who suggest there's a relationship between consumerism and environmental integration.
So I want to repeat the question, but I'm not sure I heard it, so.
Like, how would you respond to those who claim that there's a relationship between consumerism and environmental denigration?
There's a relationship between consumerism and environmental denigration?
Yeah, like in other words, the more you consume, the more waste you create, the more resources you exploit. Like, how would you dispute that argument?
I wouldn't dispute it.
So you don't. So do you think that? So you think that? So business and the what's the word? Like so business and like environmental stewardship kind of are contradicting ideas.
No, I'm not really sure I understand your question, to be honest with you.
Does anyone else? I'm asking if.
I think what he's saying is the fundamental tenet of consumerism, which is largely what drives our economy. I mean, we are a consumer-based economy. Doesn't that, to a certain degree, fundamentally contradict the idea of environmental stewardship that, as we've seen so much, whether it's overdevelopment, encroachment of natural habitats, what's we're seeing right now on the Gulf Coast, those kind of things, doesn't the natural, and bringing up a little bit funny words in your mouth, but the drive for consumerism that our economic model is based upon, that you seem to be implying we need to sort of ratchet up even further and streamline and deregulate more. The track record almost seems to show that does oftentimes lead to environmental degradation and permanent loss.
So does consumerism lead to environmental degradation? Is that the question?
Or is there a relationship between the two at the very least?
Well, consumers have lots of choices, and they can consume products that are made responsibly, or they can consume products that are made irresponsibly. We need to speak with our green dollars, and we need to buy products that are made responsibly. And soon, the businesses that don't make products responsibly or do not treat the environment responsibly will go out of business. I just give you an example of something that's, that I'm passionate about right now, and that's packaging. I think the government needs to step forward and do something about the atrocious packaging that we have in this consumer market that we buy in. My father, my kids are in Little League, and I wanted my dad to buy us some of those chairs so they could sit on the stands. And I tell you, there was nothing breakable about those chairs, and they must have come in 5 different boxes. And I just thought to myself, which companies can afford to package things so much? The packaging probably cost more than the product that was in it. And it filled my garbage can and my recycling bin. So that's where the government can step in and make some regulations in collaboration with the business community, because it's in the business community's interest to not spend a bunch of money on packaging either. So if you work together and you say, gee, we want less packaging, unnecessary packaging certainly, and it'll save you some money, that sure seems like a win-win for everybody, including the environment. Yes?
I believe you and I are in the same industry, and as you know, since about the beginning of the year, there's been a pretty decent increase in the job market. I know we're seeing it, and but also as someone who's involved in the Workforce Investment Board, in fact, I'm newly elected chair. What we do find though is that the workforce and the jobs don't always match. Would you agree that you've got a job out there to fill, and you know, it's like, where's that person to fill that job?
So your question is the workforce and...
So what do you think is the answer? You know, there's many efforts going on throughout the state through the Workforce Investment Act that, you know, we're working towards helping education figure out what are the needs in business, how can we match the workforce to, you know, to put the jobs together. So there are jobs there, and I've often said, if people had the skills to to fill some of the jobs that, you know, that we scramble to fill every day, would the economy be to the point, you know, have gotten to the point that it is?
So I'll repeat your question in just a second. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be campaigning and meet people that I wouldn't have met had I not been on a campaign, and you're one of them. What's your name?
Mary Ann Mancuso.
And what company do you represent?
Heinz and Company. We're based out of Petaluma, but I'm a resident here in Napa.
Heinzig?
Heinz and Company.
Heinz and Company. Nice to meet you. And your question is what can we do to better align the skills of our workforce with the demands of the employers? I have to tell you, in my company, I am in no shortage of people to fill jobs. I am in a shortage of jobs. So I haven't experienced the turnaround that you're speaking of. So I tend to have 5 or 10 qualified candidates for every job order that I have come across. So I am not experiencing that. However, I will attempt to answer your question, because I remember the good old days when we did have that challenge, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And it's during those times that we should have business incubators. There's a program going on at Sonoma Mountain Village in Rohnert Park. And I founded my company through a business incubator, and it was a fantastic opportunity. And I mean, I come from, you know, very humble beginnings. So does my husband, and we wanted to start a company, and we didn't have any startup funds, but there was a university that sponsored us, and they had a business incubator program, and it was that kind of a start, a jump start, that enabled us to open our company. And in business incubator programs, there are also other training opportunities that exist to give people an opportunity to work for emerging industries and different organizations that are just coming out. So I think we could do things regionally, as has started to occur in Sonoma County and Rohnert Park, to address the needs of the regional workforce, because people are very mobile, and they will go wherever the job is for them. And of course, we want to encourage people not to travel 40, 50, 60, 33 hours a day to get to a job. And I really believe that by investing in economic development, as we have in the city of Sonoma very successfully, in fact, we won a Helen Putnam Award in the city of Sonoma for our economic development program. And it's the kind of partnership between the chamber, the county, and the city of Sonoma that develops the training programs, develops the funding and the extra boost that many companies need to attract the workforce that they need to move their companies forward.
We have time for one more question.
Okay. Yes, sir.
How would you end partisan gridlock in the state legislature?
How do you end it?
Yeah, how would you end it?
I would end it by working, as I have in the city of Sonoma. I work collaboratively with all members of my city council, because I know that in order to move the city forward, we have to do that. So I spend time trying to understand what's motivating my fellow council members. Spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's motivating my fellow council members, and look for ways that we can get to a goal with everybody getting something out of it. And I don't believe in throwing somebody under the bus to move my agenda forward. So I think that there are ways that we can certainly solve a lot of the budget gridlock, certainly in the state of California, when you have the Republican Party digging their heels in, saying that they won't raise taxes, and they'll do anything but raise taxes. And you have Democrats who really sometimes want to work with the other party to balance a budget. But you have to find some common ground, and you have to find an incentive. Maybe if you do need to, say for instance, you need to raise a tax. Well, what can you give to the business community, or what can you give to your to the person that you need a vote from to move that forward? Maybe you can do something for that will help create jobs. There are lots of things that we could do in our payroll taxing model that would certainly increase jobs, and one of them is a hard look at workers' compensation insurance. And I think you would get a receptive ear from some of those Republicans who don't want to raise taxes if you said, maybe we can do something to lower the cost, the very burdensome cost of workers' compensation to business businesses and those employers who want to create new jobs by lowering their workers' comp burdens. So there are lots and lots of ways to work in a bipartisan fashion, especially if you understand what the other folks' motivation is and what they want to accomplish when they're in office.
Okay. I think we've got to call time on you now.
All right, thank you.
I did ask each of the candidates if they would have any objection to coming up together and fielding questions. I wonder if we could add 5 more minutes to this. And yes, all of you together. Let the audience pose a question to all 3 of you. Yeah, you don't need to time them on this one. I'll keep an eye on it this time.
You need to keep an eye on it, Joanne.
Yeah.
So we know what the format is. Are we taking questions and who's going first? Are we rotating?
The questions we're going to go to whomever, from whomever. So
you want each one of us to maybe take the first one and then go on?
Well, let's see what questions we still have remaining. Do we have some questions out there? Please tell me we do. You want to raise your phone? And do you want to address it to all 3 of them, or just one specific candidate?
That's why I didn't raise any questions individually.
You want to do all 3? Okay.
The question is, with the very low approval rating of the state legislature, what do you feel you can do to raise public opinion? I think we're down to 13% of the last poll of the approval rate for the state legislature. What can you do to raise the approval rating to make you be able to do your jobs better, do the job that you seek out?
Sure, I'll start off.
Okay, you wouldn't mind repeating the
Yeah,
question?
no, I'll repeat the question. And it's a very good one. The question is, what can we do to improve the very low approval rating of the state legislature? And it is very low. I think it might even be less than 11%. And the governor's is low as well. It's a really tough time right now, and it's a very dysfunctional legislature. There's a couple of things we can do to make it operate better, which I think would improve people's opinion of the legislature. One of the things I mentioned that makes this dysfunction is the 2/3 supermajority vote requirement. We're seeing the same dynamic right now in the United States Senate, where they're struggling with a similar thing. There's that. There's term limits. In any given 2-year period, 1/3 of the assembly is brand new and 1/3 of the assembly is lame ducks. So it's almost impossible to do anything in that kind of a situation. The third thing I'll just mention very briefly, because I know I need to hand the mic over to other people. Personally, I've tried very hard to increase public access and transparency. As I mentioned, I opened up the budget process for the first time to public hearings. I have created a budget blog. It's at www.californiabudget.blogspot.com. I blog all the time. You can go read it. It's on my website. I have a website. I have a PowerPoint presentation on the state budget that I'll give to any community group that wants to hear it. And I also have a YouTube video on the budget. It's not a mystery. So one of the things I think we need to do is to make this more transparent and more accessible to the public.
I saw that poll, I think it's the Rasmussen poll, and it also said that the approval rate of the state legislature among those 40 to 60 is 5%. So it's very dramatic. But I always liked this cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle that did the Travels with Farley, and there's this Travels with Farley comic strip that Farley is climbing to the top of a mountain, and on top of the mountain is this guru named Baba Rebop. And Farley says to the guru, he says, how can we get our children from escaping reality through drug abuse and alcoholism? And Baba Rebop said 2 simple words: improve reality. We need to improve reality in order to get the respect back for the legislature. And when we see that there are city managers who are retired from planning with $150,000 a year retirement, and now they're getting $200,000 a year, or department heads leaving, retiring out at $100,000 a year at the age of 50, going to another county with a similar job making $200,000 a year, there's a lot of things going on that, I mean, it's the death of 1,000 cuts of the economic engine of California, where time and again Californians are seeing how the legislature, how our city and our county governments are not using our resources to best advantage. We're gutting the nonprofits and the volunteers in our community while giving department heads raises. And I have evidence of all of this. The county's very used to me doing Public Record Act requests, and I've also done a lot of research with the state. But I think what we need to do, and by the way, I do oppose changing that 2/3 majority for tax increases. As I said, until we reform the government in California, all the money is just going to go towards pensions and towards covering these unfunded benefits. So I'm opposed to the 2/3, to a simple majority for tax increases. But I think we need to work hard on improving reality. Thank you very much.
So just to repeat the question again, since I'm the third person in line, is what can we do to improve the approval rating or the image, so to speak, of the legislature? And the first thing I think we can do is have open primaries. I know it's not something that is very popular on the flyer that you were giving out today, but I think it would do wonders to help us elect folks with a little bit more moderate approach, people who are not so entrenched in an extreme partisan fashion. And when you have people that are elected that are extremely partisan, you get this partisan gridlock, which is what we see today in the legislature. And frankly, when people come to a body and they have such extreme views, one extreme or another, it makes it very difficult for them to work together. The other thing is something that I think that I mentioned earlier in my speech, which is being able to expunge votes from the public record. I mean, how does the public feel about that? How do you feel about not really knowing how the person that you not only elected to represent you, but you pay to represent you, is able to expunge or erase their voting record on a particular item from the public record? I mean, it starts there. That's a basic level of accountability that we should be demanding as residents of this state. So those are two ways that I have come up with that I think you could improve the approval rating. Certainly the things that we have seen most recently, again, I'm going through the throes on my city council. Just last night, we were debating, and we had to continue the item, how we're going to come up with the $2.5 million to turn over to the state. We know it's going to crush us, but when I see, as a city councilwoman, city of Sonoma, when I see the legislature handing out hefty raises on their way out the door to legislative staffers, while I'm sitting back in Sonoma trying to figure out how I'm going to cough up and write the check for